Okay. I think we can start now.
Okay. Right. Very good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Kenny Ng. I'll be the moderator for our session this evening. I'm one of the lawyers for the Koh family. And in fact, the Koh family, Pastor Raymond Koh, Susanna, and the rest of them are all my personal dear friend. Time passes quickly. On the 13th of February, 2017, on a bright day, Pastor Raymond Koh was abducted. And though reports have been made, the Suhakam went through a proper public inquiry and came to that conclusion that Pastor Raymond Koh, Amri were both abducted by the state. And the Suhakam inquiry conclusively point to that direction. On the 6th phase from now, will be exactly 4 years. And the family and the public and everybody who's interested in this case is still kept in the dark as to what is happening to Pastor Raymond Koh, Amri Chekmat, and likewise for the other two as well. And this evening, as part of that campaign to continue to remember Pastor Raymond Koh, we are holding this webinar. And this evening, we have lined up a few programs and a few speakers to share with us on this subject matter. But first of all, I'll get the admin to put on the screen what is the program for this evening. Admin, please. Right, as part of the promotional program for the coming days, we have this icon, reflect, remember, respond, release Raymond Koh. Later on, Susanna will be sharing with us in more detail what this campaign will be about. This evening, we have 6 speakers. Gil, I mentioned, Dr. Gudia Singh, Madam Mariam Mokhtar, Rama Ramanatnam, Dr. Jara Gomez, and Susanna herself. The first speaker for our list is Gil Manchin. But because of the time difference between the United States and here, Gil won't be with us personally, but we are grateful that she has posted for us a video. And admin will show that video to us shortly. Gil is the chairperson of USCIRF, which stands for the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom. Gil is an educator and a former First Lady of West Virginia, an advocate for children and families. And we are grateful that Pastor Raymond Koh has been adopted by USCIRF as a prisoner of conscience. Now the admin will show us that video from Gil, who is based in the United States. Admin, please.
Good evening, and hello from the United States. My name is Gail Manchin, and I am chair of the United States Commission on International Religious Freedom, or USCIRF. We are a bipartisan, independent legislative branch agency that makes recommendations to the President of the United States, the Secretary of State, and the U.S. Congress on ways to advance freedom of religion and belief worldwide. Our 9 commissioners are appointed by the majority and minority party leaders of Congress and by the President. And while we are a U.S. government agency, we monitor religious freedom according to the international standards, including religious freedom protections outlined in Articles 18 of the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. Even though USCIRF is a part of the United States government, its staff heavily rely on the facts and reporting of civil society actors on the ground and human rights organizations, both in the government and regionally. Panel discussions like this are critical for bringing together our many voices to discuss ongoing issues from our unique perspectives, as well as for building networks to further research, advocacy, and collaboration. I'd like to thank Susanna Liu for the invitation to speak here and for her hard work in organizing this panel. I regret I could only lend my voice in this pre-recorded message, and yet I am confident that discussions that this panel's distinguished speakers will engage in will be both illuminating and inspiring. Susanna has been a tireless and courageous advocate for her husband and for those who have disappeared and the religious freedom of all people in Malaysia. Last year, I was thrilled to hear the news that she had won the International Woman of Courage Award. I offer her my much belated congratulations for this well-deserved honor. Congratulations, Susanna. One of USCIRF's central missions is its annual report, which is released by the 1st of May each year. This report contains a chapter for each country that our staff and commissioners have determined meet the threshold of either a country of particular concern, or CPC for short, or the special watch list, as mandated by the International Religious Freedom Act of 1998. CPC countries are the worst violators of religious freedom in the world, committing egregious, systematic, and ongoing violations of freedom of religion and belief. Our second tier, the special watch list, is for those countries that meet 2 of the requirements, but not all 3. Malaysia, unfortunately, has met the standard for USCIRF to recommend its inclusion in that second category every year since 2014. In addition to USCIRF's annual report, our staff regularly pursue projects to highlight specific multinational themes of religious freedom violations or to provide updates on a given country. In October of last year, we released a report on the Rohingya refugees in Southeast Asia, which focused especially on Malaysia's treatment of refugees and migrants. In October 2019, our staff also released a fact sheet in response
Is there a technical hitch on that?
forcibly disappeared, at least in part, for their faith practices and or identity. Even with the global fight against the coronavirus pandemic and the current state of emergency in Malaysia, it is imperative that we maintain the pressure for greater respect for freedom of religion and belief there. As you know intimately, Malaysia has experienced unprecedented levels of political crisis and turbulence during this last year. In these emotionally charged times, it is vital that civil society, members of the government, and average citizens recall the strength and harmony that Malaysia's diversity brings. Stronger religious freedom protections, not just for minority religious communities, but also for the majority, can only bring greater harmony as each community is freed to pursue their faith or none at all, according to their own conscience. In reporting, USCIRF has highlighted the religious freedom implications of Malaysia's dual legal system, which enforces a state-sponsored interpretation of Islam on all Muslims without allowing any space for their ability to opt in or opt out. Additionally, this system has implicated many individuals who identify as Muslim, but not as Sunni Muslim in particular, into a religious legal system to which their understanding of their faith does not subscribe. We have also been alarmed in recent weeks at the increased rhetoric and attacks by state and federal religious departments against members of the Muslim LGBT community. Despite all its shortcomings and recent political turbulence, Malaysia is still an example of democracy and a place where the freedom of expression, rule of law, and interreligious harmony can yet be found in a region filled with authoritarianism, corrupt governments, and interreligious and ethnic conflict. This rich potential is why USCIRF has often urged the U.S. government to work with its partners in the Malaysian government to solidify its foundation of human rights through ratification of international human rights treaties, such as the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. As I mentioned earlier, in October 2019, USCIRF published a fact sheet detailing the findings and religious implication of Suhakam's report on enforced disappearances. In that report, we alerted the U.S. government to the religious freedom dimension of the disappearances of both Amri and Raymond Koh. These individuals were undeniably targeted in part for their religious practices and identity. In November 2020, my colleague, Commissioner Jim Carr, adopted Pastor Koh through USCIRF's Religious Prisoner of Conscience project. This project is a commissioner-led endeavor to raise the profile of individuals whose cases are illustrative of a trend or are otherwise noteworthy for their egregious nature. Pastor Koh's disappearance at the hand of security forces, as well as the disappearances of other individuals mentioned in the course of this discussion, represent an ominous turn for Malaysia. Such a turn does not do the diverse peoples of Malaysia justice. USCIRF will continue to raise the case of Pastor Koh in its publications, in its conversations and recommendations to the President and the Congress of the United States, and in its interactions with the Malaysian government and civil society. We continue to be discouraged by the reluctance of Malaysia's Special Task Force to release its findings on the investigation into the disappearances of Raymond Koh and others. USCIRF adds its voice to the calls by civil society for the release of this report and for the government of Malaysia to make good on its own promises to pursue justice and transparency on this issue, as well as to prevent further disappearances and other such injustices from occurring. In conclusion, I want to thank you all again for your time and again for including me in this discussion. A crucial component of our work in pre-pandemic times was travel to meet activists and leaders such as all of you. I sincerely look forward to the opportunity, as soon as this pandemic is over, for USCIRF commissioners and staff to meet with each of you in person, whether in Malaysia or here in the United States. In the meantime, please do consider USCIRF in your work. For while we cannot meet in person, we are still connected, as this panel demonstrates, and there is much work yet to be done. I wish each of you and all of you well, and would like to conclude by reiterating USCIRF's deep admiration for your tireless work to build a Malaysia that respects the international standards of freedom of religion and belief and truly fosters harmony for all of its people. Thank you.
Thank you, admin, for that video. Truly, we are grateful for Gail and USCIRF for their moral and other support for our cause for Pastor Raymond Koh and Susanna Koh. Truly, we are very encouraged and touched by their adoption of Pastor Raymond Koh as a prisoner of conscience. Next, in our timetable for this evening, we have a renowned personality, Dr. Gudia Singh Nija, my dear friend and fellow lawyer. He needs very little introduction. He's a chairman of Suhakam, the National Human Rights Society. Amongst others, he's also a columnist for the Sunday daily newspapers called Law Speak. In fact, he volunteered pro bono as our lead counsel during the Suhakam inquiry into Pastor Raymond Koh and Amri Checkmate. Dr. Gudia this evening will share with us his insight on the aspect of our human rights from our Constitution. Dr. Gudia, please.
Thank you, Chairman, Moderator Kenny, my good friend, and of course Susanna and the family and friends who are tuning into this webinar. Well, it's been 4 long years, 4 long, tiring, waiting years since Pastor Koh has been abducted. And so what can I say? I think it's time to reflect on a broader canvas and realize that actually Pastor Koh's disappearance or abduction goes far beyond just Pastor Koh himself. In fact, it depicts several disquieting features relating to accountability, relating to transparency of the governance system of this country itself. And it represents a very sad and sorry slide towards a deterioration of the body politic, and we are on the pathway to a slippery slope in this regard. So we can discern some rather ugly features that we can now realize have become part and parcel of the whole governance system. One is, of course, there is a disrespect for the existing institutions of governance. There is a disrespect for the multiracial ethos of the society itself. There seems to be a slide against the freedom of religions that is being that is guaranteed by the federal constitution itself. There is us and them, race and religion preeminence, which is contaminating the mainstreams of society. And then we have also a lot of other environmental and other concerns where there's a domination, sometimes through leakages, through corruption and so on, which is adding rather serious concerns to the way in which we view society itself. We have, an attempt by the government to try to exclude, as far as possible, scrutiny of decisions that are made by public authorities through what they call ouster clauses. That means, courts cannot look into the rights and wrongs that are committed by public authorities. And then, of course, we have, now we have an emergency where the executive has taken over complete power. This parliament has been suspended, although the article on emergency itself provides a check and balance provision for parliament as the voice of the people, as the democratic institution representing the voice of the people itself. So in a way, in a sense, Pastor Koh's case encapsulates and highlights these ills in a very profound way. And if I could go into some specifics, first, for example, you see, first is that a man of the highest calling, a man of God, right, was abducted so brazenly in the daytime in a very daring act itself. Then there was a denial that the state was involved. There were all kinds of pretensions whereby the state said that they were exerting efforts to, pursue vigorously. There were all kinds of subterfuges that were constructed by the state to say that, the state which has a police force, a special branch, which is very efficient, recognized the world over for its efficiency, failing to even provide any solution to this. So that's the first point about the brazenness of the action. The second, of course, was the Suhakam inquiry itself. And Suhakam, we must not forget, is a public institution. And we found all kinds of subterfuges and shenanigans to derail the whole process itself. And then when all that failed, the third point is when the task force was set up, it was a sham. It was set up with those who were being accused or those who were identified by Suhakam itself as being responsible, sitting in the task force itself. And then after some adjustments, after public hue and cry, the report is still not out yet. And from what we hear from Susanna itself, the way in which the task force conducted is quite shameless, because they make the victim, they accuse the victim instead of providing an amelioration and looking very seriously into the abduction itself. And then fourthly, of course, we filed a case after Suhakam. Report of the task force is not out yet, so we have filed a case, and they're resisting the case with every effort. The Attorney General's Chambers is resisting the case against this, despite the fact that there are very clear investigative powers that Suhakam carried out on a very extensive basis with a large number of witnesses. And the fifth one I just want to talk about very quickly is, so these kind of problems in the institutions, in the ethos of the society itself, have been more recently exposed, for example, by a very brave and courageous expose by Tommy Thomas, the former Attorney General. And we have seen what the reaction is, and that itself, it portends very badly for the future of the country itself, where people speaking up despite, personal, there could be personal consequences. There is a denial of the freedom of speech, the freedom to articulate one's insight, to tell one's story, and to provide some kind of insight into the workings. Right or wrong, the right to dissent, the right to provide alternative viewpoints is now under threat. This has been demonstrated very recently. And there are even skewed calls to demonize persons who do this, like, for example, their honorifics, like honorifics should be removed. Police reports lodged, you find that those high personalities in very prominent cases who have been convicted of high crimes, there is no calls for them to be, for them to be demonized in the way in which Tommy Thomas is being demonized. And the final point I want to make is that what is the way forward? All right. There are two alternatives that we have as citizens of this country in learning from the kind of experience and the kind of terrible plight of Pastor Koh itself and those and Amri and so on. One is to roll over. You can be a poodle. You roll over and get tickled and obey his master's voice. Or the other alternative is to resist these kinds of tendencies that have begun to appear in rather pronounced ways. And in a way, resistance is very important in ways that, of course, are acceptable within the context of the Constitution. I just come away from acting for the residents of TTDI, whose park was going to be, cut off for use by the residents. And the courts came to the rescue. So this is the kind of resistance that is needed. Our own suit, Pastor Koh's own suit, is also a form of resistance to expose the hypocrisy, the lack of accountability and transparency. So there are dark days ahead, but as a very famous political icon once said, that without the cold and bitterness of winter, we will never appreciate the warmth and splendor of spring. And on that note, I say thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to say a few words on this very memorable day. Thank you very much, Kenny.
Thank you, Dr. Gudiana, for sharing your insight. Later on, there'll be questions posed to you. Now, I'll ask you one or two questions as well. Now, the third speaker for this evening is none other than Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we thank you, Dr. Gudia, for his insight on this subject matter. He'll be still around. Later on, we'll pose some questions for him. And then next in line, we have Miss Mariam Mokhtar. Mariam needs very little introduction. I believe she has a big following for what she writes for Malaysian Kini, Rebuilding Malaysia. She has a big following, at least in the Klang Valley. And tonight, we are truly very privileged, very honored, and look forward firsthand to hear Mariam, what she has to share with us on this subject matter. I believe is dear in her heart as well. Mariam, over to you, please. Kindly unmute. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much. Right. I'd like all of you to imagine how you would feel if you were Susanna, Pastor Koh's wife, or even Nur Hayati, the wife of Amri Chetmat, or any of their children. Susanna, Nur Hayati, and their children. Now, you can't imagine it because it's impossible to experience their trauma. When a loved one disappears, the feeling is like a wound that refuses to heal. There is no finality. Where is he? How is he? Is he okay? Now, on 13th February 2017, Pastor Raymond Koh was abducted in a slick operation that took probably 40 seconds. You may think his disappearance has nothing to do with you, but it has got everything to do with you, because it describes the state of the country. It is a reflection of what is happening in Malaysia today. It is a tangled web of incompetence, lies, controversy, cover-ups, intolerance, and a state that is determined to repress its own citizens. So in this webinar, I will guide you through 3 simple steps to show you why you should care. These are the 3 simple steps. Okay, now Malaysia is a sick nation of Asia, and for over 4 decades, our human rights have slowly been eroded. Words, drawings, cartoons, that's Zuna there, and articles have been generating a tsunami of police reports and the dreaded Sedition Act. I think I've lost the thread of my, admin, can you help? Okay, I've got it now. If you live in Malaysia, you know what it's like, because intolerance and extremism is on the rise, and some people are considered more equal than others. The tourist, he doesn't see what it's like. All he wants is the sea, the sand, the beach, and the makan sedap, yeah? The visiting Malaysian, he doesn't see it because he's living and working abroad. And the majority of expatriates in Malaysia, they learn to keep their mouth shut. Now, Pastor Koh, Pastor Joshua Hilmi, Amri Chekmat, all disappeared within 4 months of one another. None of them were millionaire philanthropists. They were not a kidnap risk. No family member received a ransom note demanding payment for their release. So what is the common thread that links them? To try and understand all this, you've got to look a bit into their backgrounds. Now, Pastor Koh and Susanna started an NGO called Community Harapan. This NGO helped the homeless, the single mothers, the poor, HIV/AIDS sufferers, and many of them were Malay. Did the authorities feel threatened by what Pastor Koh was doing? Was he reaching out to them and showing that here was a compassionate Christian doing good works for the community? Did they then feel moved that they wanted to become Christian like him? We don't know. Yeah. So the next person on the list is Joshua and Ruth Hilmi. Joshua was a Malay who converted to Christianity, and his wife Ruth was Indonesian. They allegedly wanted to leave the country because they had been receiving threatening emails and warnings to get out of the place, but they couldn't go because of visa problems or something. So they also disappeared sometime in November 2016. Now, did the authorities fear that Joshua's presence in Malaysia would embolden the Malays to convert? Because he was allegedly accused of proselytizing the Malays. The fourth person is Amri Chekmat. He lived up in Perlis, and he had a not-for-profit, a charity helping the poor and the single mothers. The charity was called Perlis Hope. The authorities accused Perlis Hope of fronting Shia activities. And 1 year before he also disappeared, he received, well, his house was raided by the Perlis Mufti, Dr. Mazhar, and also the religious authorities. Now, Shia Muslims, as some of you may be aware, are not allowed to practice their faith in Malaysia. So the NGO is forced to close its doors as they do not wish their donors to feel the full force of the law. So why were these people removed? 4 people in 4 months. Envy, as you know, is one of the cardinal sins. Were they envious of the good work done by all these people, especially those who are helping the poor? Now, the common thread that links all these people is religion. However, if you look at this, Article 11 of the Constitution guarantees us freedom of religion. And the most important, or one of the important verse in the Quran, Surah Al-Baqarah 256, says that there is no compulsion in religion. So what is happening here? Why is the state itself not upholding the law in Malaysia and practicing the religion as it should be? So now we come to part 2, failure of the state to protect its citizens. Now, a few hours before Pastor Koh was abducted, another incident was unfolding at KLIA 2. Kim Jong-nam, the half-brother of Kim Jong-un, the supreme leader of North Korea, was assassinated. I'd like you to compare the response of the authorities. In 2 days, Kim Jong-nam's killers were found. But when Susanna Liu tried to make a police report about her husband, she was interrogated or questioned for 5 hours. Why are you wasting so much police time? And then when the video footage appeared from a private house, they questioned the veracity of that video. Now, afterwards, we're going to watch that same video, and you can see a witness who stumbled upon the abduction, reversing his car in a hurry. What's happened to that witness? Has he been threatened? Now, you know that in Malaysia, we have CCTVs just about on every building. Now, there are 2 petrol stations up the road, SS4B/10. All petrol stations, you know, have CCTVs. So what happened to the reporting? Did the police pay them a visit? There's also some intersections along this main road. You know that this is not just a road in the Ulu, it's a highway, a double highway. So what happened to that CCTV? You know, in Malaysia, whenever a CCTV is involved, it's always pointing the wrong way, it is faulty, there is no recording or no recording facility, or it was missing because it was taken for repair. So we spend hundreds of millions of ringgits on surveillance equipment. So what happened? Yeah, why are we doing this to our own people? It didn't help Teo Bangkok, it didn't help Ahmad Sabani, A. Coogan, and all the other political detainees, not political detainees, police detainees in the police lockups. Last month, some of you may be aware that an underage girl was raped in the Miri lockup. And we were told the CCTV did not have a recording facility. Oh, come on. The Raya is not stupid. Yeah. So why is this happening to us? Why are we spending so much money on all this equipment? The police and the special branch are supposed to be amongst the best in the world, but as you can see, no one saw anything, no one found anything, no one heard anything. Let's compare two other disappearances. Now, the first one is of Nora Quarine, the French-Irish girl who came to Malaysia in August 2019 and disappeared the day after she arrived. She disappeared from a resort in Dusun, Negeri Sembilan. Look at the response again of the police. Overnight, there was helicopters, police tracker dogs, 350 army were deployed to cordon off the area and show pictures of her to the villagers. Unofficially, BOMOs were also involved. Police roadblocks were set up. Now, was the same amount of manpower and resources used in Pastor Koh's case? Another disappearance is that of Indra. This is the police dogs used in Nora Quarine's disappearance. Now, the other one is Indra Gandhi. She has not seen her daughter for the past 12 years because the daughter was abducted by her convert husband. The IGP and all the other IGPs, as in Pastor Koh's case too, said, you know, they don't know anything, or there's always some excuse. There's always a long list of excuses for not doing their job. In Indra Gandhi's case, the IGP, Khalid Abu Bakar, said that he felt a conflict between Sharia law and civil law. So this is why I say the authorities have failed the people. You can't administer a country with two sets of laws, Sharia and civil, because it is individuals who bear the burden. Now, as in the Nora Quarine case in Kim Jong Nam, people think Malaysians, the perception is that there is a different response investigating foreigners and locals. Where Malaysians are concerned, especially in Pastor Koh's case, and Amri and Joshua Hilmi, the police appear to drag their feet. And in Indra's case, there's preferential treatment for those of a particular religion. You're Sunni, you're fine. If you're Shia, it's not so okay. So why have the police forsaken the oath to protect the public? So we come to the third bit. The erosion of our human rights is a consequence of neglect by our leaders and also us, our apathy. There is a vaccine for coronavirus because we were already sick before coronavirus hit us. But there is no vaccine for corrupt and greedy politicians. In money laundering, you follow the paper trail. When priceless gems are stolen, you follow the trail left by the rings or whatever jewelry there is. But in the abduction of these four people, the muddy trail will lead you to Putrajaya, where there are the two R's, race and religion. Our hypocritical Malay leaders wield an invisible stick. Non-Muslims know that their lives are controlled by the religious leaders. You have temples being demolished, crosses banned from churches. And many Malays are also increasingly finding out that their private lives are also under scrutiny. You can't befriend non-Muslims. You can't wear certain clothes. You can't listen to certain music. You can't enter beauty contests. There's so many things happening to the Malays. However, some of you may feel very helpless and hopeless, but I tell you, no, don't, yeah, because we can do something about it. First of all, it's education. Teach your children at home. Intolerance and extremism are not good for all of us. It's not just in schools, but also in the workplace and in the community. Highlight to the international community about what is happening in your country. Create awareness, speak out on behalf of everyone, yeah, what is happening. Don't be afraid to discuss about sensitive issues. Make your politician do some work instead of enjoying their free travel and their Mercedes cars and their high gajis. Now, the state has no right to deny you the right to life, the right to freedom of expression, the right to freedom of religion, just because you disagree with it. But you've got to do something now. Do something now before your loved one is taken from you. We do not want to become the next Syria or Argentina or Iraq. Do your bit to honor Pastor Koh. Feed the story of the missing 4 and keep it alive. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mariam, for your sharing. We truly appreciate you share from your heart. Later on, there'll be some questions for you, or at least I will have a question for you. Now, the next session, I'll pass to admin. Admin will show us a video clip before we proceed with the remaining 3 speakers that we have this evening. Admin, over to you, please.
My name is Susanna Liu, and I'm one of the recipients for the International Women of Courage 2020. And I want to continue to highlight this case in the international scene, not only for Pastor Raymond, but also for the other 3 activists who have been disappeared, Amri, Joshua and Ruth Helmi. Religious freedom is a basic human right, and everyone should have the right to express their beliefs. Anyone can get involved in activism, and regardless of their background and abilities, and this will make the country a better place when women speak out for their rights.
Thank you, admin, for that video clip. Thank you, Susanna, for sharing your heart out in the video clip. We shall now continue this evening with our next speaker. The next speaker is another dear friend of mine from civil society. He's none other than Rama Ramanathan, who is the spokesperson for CAGE. CAGE stands for Citizens Against Enforced Disappearances. Rama by training as an engineer, but now he basically spends time as a change catalyst in society. He's an active blogger. Visit his blog. He writes very well, expresses himself very well. And in his blog, he records many cases of such adoption and people who are also victims of custody by the state. Rama, over to you this evening, please.
Thank you very much, Kenny. I decided that in light of my difficulties with manipulating slides and speaking and so on and so forth, I decided that it would be better for our listeners if I just prepared a video. So if admin could just show that video and then we can take questions at the end. Thank you. Over the past 4 years, I've often been thankful for 4 persons. The first is the law intern Roshan Celestine Gomez. Roshan witnessed the abduction of Raymond Koh. He took time out of his busy day to go and make a police report. He took the time to wait at the police station for his statement to be recorded. Thanks to his report, the local police swung into action and began investigating the abduction. Despite his car being broken into while parked away from his home, his bag being taken, and then mysteriously returned at his home, he testified bravely and openly at the Suhakam inquiry. If not for Roshan, we may never know how Raymond disappeared. The second is a person or persons whose identity remains unknown. This person used the CCTV recordings of Raymond's abduction and made the 3-minute annotated video clip which went viral after it was published by the Star. Now we can all say 7, 15, 40 and be understood as meaning 7 vehicles, 15 persons, and 14 seconds. If not for this unknown person, the abduction of Raymond would not have become a national issue. The third is the security guard, Yusri Khalid. Though it was a rainy night, Yusri and his colleagues responded to a vehicle which they saw leaving a wooded area suspiciously. Despite the bad weather, he immediately went to the local police station and reported what they saw and heard. And found. They had found Amri's car, windows broken, identification marks removed. If not for Yusri's prompt report, the local police would not have swung into action and rapidly identified that the car was the one used daily by Amri Chekmat. The fourth is a member of the Special Branch, Sergeant Shamzaini. In a fit of remorse over wrongdoing in the police force, in the dark of night, he revealed critical information to Amri's wife. Thanks to the information he gave, Suhakam could draw a very credible conclusion. Sadly, and most likely due to pressure from his superiors and peers, Shamzaini retracted his statement. Despite this, I am thankful for him. It's to be noted that although he perjured himself, it seems he has not been the subject of any disciplinary action or criminal prosecution. Roshan and Yusri believed we have a criminal justice system in Malaysia. The right thing to do if we suspect a crime has been committed is to make a police report and to cooperate with the police in the subsequent investigation. We expect the police to investigate. We expect the Attorney General to prosecute. We expect the judiciary to conduct a trial. As the Suhakam inquiry into the disappearances of Amri and Raymond progressed, it became very clear that the local police did mobilize quickly. In fact, minus a few hiccups, they moved fast in the first few hours. It also became clear that over time, perhaps after they became aware of who the victims were or because of directions from their superiors at the federal level, the investigation crawled to tortoise pace. I must add that the federal police connected the cases of the disappearances of Amri Chekmat, Joshua Helmi, and Ruth Sitepu and Raymond Koh. The investigating officer in the Raymond Koh case testified that he received instructions from a DCP Datuk Huzir, Deputy Director of Intelligence and Operations, in the Federal Police Headquarters in Bukit Aman. The Federal Police were controlling the investigations. It's worth noting that 6 weeks after Suhakam issued its reports, Huzair was promoted to the rank of commissioner and is now head of the Criminal Investigation Department. It was also clear that the police officers who testified were highly intelligent men. They could connect the dots, just like we could, and just like Suhakam did in its final reports. Suhakam highlighted 4 common features in the disappearances. 1. Religious issues. Amri and Raymond were members of minority expressions of faith, involved in doing charity work, which the state felt was being used as a pretext for conversion. 2. Direct surveillance. Both Amri and Raymond were monitored by the special branch and the religious authorities. 3. Similar modus operandi. Similar vehicles were involved and the same boxing in procedure was used. 4. Presence of a gold Toyota Vios. The police tried to conceal the identity of this car. However, thanks to whistleblower Sergeant Shamzaini, they had to reveal that the car was owned by an employee of the police. Those of us who watched as police officers were questioned during the Suhakam inquiry began to conclude that some police witnesses themselves believed police were somehow involved in the abductions. So we were not surprised when Suhakam concluded that the special branch did it. It's now 22 months since Suhakam issued its findings. It's now 20 months since a so-called investigation task force was formed by the then Home Minister Muhyiddin Yassin. From the beginning we said it's a bogus task force. Its members were initially all males, all Muslims. This, in a case which clearly involved Muslim elements. 2 of its members were police officers, 1 retired, 1 serving. Dato' Mokhtar was the officer commanding the officers who represented the police during the inquiry. To his credit, in response to public clamour, Mokhtar resigned. Dato' Zamri is the head of JIPS, the Integrity, Standards and Compliance Unit of the police force. This is one of the units of the police which ought to be investigated by the task force. However, despite the clear conflict of interest and public clamour, Zamri did not resign. The person appointed chairman of the task force is a High Court judge who retired early. Dato' Abdul Rahim Uda was the judge who upheld the coroner's open verdict in the Teo Beng Hock case, a verdict which was later overturned by a panel of Court of Appeal judges, including Dato' Ma Weng Kwai, the chairman of the Suhakam panel of inquiry. Because of this, we said he has a conflict of interest and should not be appointed, but he did not do the honourable thing. He did not resign. In response to public clamour, Muhyiddin appointed 2 others to the task force, 1 Malay Muslim lady and a Chinese non-Muslim man. But Muhyiddin retained the choice of a relatively junior, conflicted judge as chairman. Also, the composition of the task force was very different from that recommended by Suhakam in its reports. What Suhakam called for was feet on the ground, to pursue leads the police failed to pursue. Instead, the government appointed 7 people to review Suhakam's findings. I say this because of the profiles of the persons appointed and because the government refused to publish their terms of reference. It's now 14 months since the task force was to submit its report. We know from a news report that they asked for an extension to write their report. It's likely that they submitted the report 12 months ago. What are their findings? Will we ever find out? I think we'll only find out if thousands of us shout out that we have the same expectations as Roshan, Yusri, and the unknown person who made the video. But what can we do to make the government and the police act against those who ordered, condoned, or conducted the enforced disappearances? How can the victims be found? How can their families get closure? I think the answer is to become politically engaged. Write to your MP, go and meet him or her, go with others, demand that police reform is put high on the political agenda, make it a campaign issue, be riled up about every abuse of police power, not just enforced disappearances. Ask questions, send reminders, put it on social media, tell stories, share stories, organize and join marches, make police reports, dare to believe that justice can be restored in Malaysia. Embrace a life of discomfort so that the future can be better. Become a persistent virus for good. Will you join the struggle to restore justice in Malaysia?
Thank you, Rama, for sharing that. Very clear, elaborated a lot of things. Later on, I'm sure there'll be a further questions for you. This evening, we'll continue with the next speaker, another dear friend of mine and a fellow lawyer, Dr. Jared Gomez. Dr. Jared Gomez is another lead counsel. He did a pro bono for Susanna and family at the Suhakam Public Inquiry. Jared is active in many important cases on behalf of civil society. This evening, he'll share with us. He's a counsel now and lawyer through his firm. He has filed a civil suit on behalf of Susanna's family against the government of Malaysia, against the Home Minister, against the IGP, against the former IGP, I think, and many more senior police officers. I think this evening you'll share with us a few things about that up and coming suit and what we can expect. Jared, over to you, please.
Yes, thank you, Kenny. I prepared a PowerPoint that I hope will make those points. I've been given about 5 to 10 minutes to share with you about the findings of Suhakam and the case filed by Susanna. Because a picture paints 1,000 words, so I'll use some pictures to make that point. I'll confine myself to 7 points. I start with what Suhakam is. Suhakam is just short form for Suruhanjaya Hak Asasi Manusia, which means Human Rights Commission of Malaysia. The first and important point to note is that Suhakam is not an NGO. It is a body set up by Parliament through an act of Parliament, which states its functions, powers, and jurisdiction. Similar to the Police Act or the Security Commissions Act, it is an institution established by the government. The commissioners are appointed by the King, the Yang di-Pertuan Agong, based on advice of the Prime Minister. The second point to note is that one of the main functions of Suhakam is found in section 12, subsection 1, which is, as you can see on the PowerPoint, to inquire into allegations of infringement of human rights of such persons or group of persons. And that is what Suhakam did. The third point is that the Commission of Inquiry had clear terms of reference. They did not go on a frolic of their own. I will just highlight 2. 16, under paragraph 16A, it says very clearly, their terms of reference was to determine whether these are cases of enforced disappearance. And if you look at para B, Roman 2, it says, to identify persons or agencies responsible for such alleged breach or breaches. My fourth point is, which I believe is equally important, is that the commissioners selected were very respected and credible people who had a good track record with the government and the public. We have Dato' Ma Weng Kwai, who was a previous High Court judge and a Court of Appeal judge, a past president of the Bar Council of Malaysia and the past president of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association. We had Professor Dr. Aisha Bedin. She's a professor of law and was Dean of the University Kebangsaan Law Faculty. We also had Dr. Nick Saleda Suhaila, who's an expert on Sharia law and Islamic law. Not only is she a senior lecturer in the Faculty of Sharia and Law at the Islamic Science University of Malaysia, she has also written books and edited books on Sharia and the law. it is important to note that these are not ordinary people, but specialists in their own respective fields, apart from being highly respected and credible, both to the government and to the public. Now, in both Raymond Koh and Amri Chemat's case, they were heard at about the same time, sometimes one after the other, because the witnesses could come at different times. For Raymond Koh's case, it took about 20 days. Amri's case took about 27 days of hearing. The commissioners heard evidence of 40 witnesses altogether. By looking at some of the snippets there, you can appreciate the tension and pressure throughout the whole inquiry, but also the thoroughness of the commissioners. It was regularly reported by our press. Now, counsels for the family, there were officers from PDRM acting for the police, officers from Suhakam, representatives from the Bar Council, all took part in the inquiry and also submitted before the panel before a final decision was made in March 2019. Just to give you a glimpse of how the premises of the inquiry looked like, how it took place. You know, somehow Professor Gurdial, Stephen Thiru, and myself managed to share that small table. My fifth point is the conclusion and finding of the commissioners after hearing all the evidence and looking at all the evidence is very pertinent and important, because you have a credible government institution after going through all the evidence making such a finding. It's nothing like seeing it for yourself. This is what they wrote. After having held a lengthy deliberation, the unanimous view that Pastor Koh is the victim of enforced disappearance as defined under Article 2 of the ICPED, which is the International Convention of the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance, that took place on February 13 at about 10:45. And 36, I highlight, the direct circumstantial evidence in Pastor Raymond Koh's case proves on a balance of probabilities that he was abducted by state agents, namely the Special Branch, Bukit Aman, Kuala Lumpur. That is the finding of these three independent commissioners. Now, with such a finding, the family was elated. They were so happy, you know, that finally a body has come out to say what happened. So they made a trip to see the then Home Minister, who is now our Prime Minister, Tan Sri Muhyiddin Yassin. It was a fruitful trip. Tan Sri told us in clear terms, I will get to the bottom of this. You know, it was arranged by Teresa Koch, and this is the team that went along. But after several months, we did not hear from the Home Minister. The family waited and waited, and they did not know what they could do next. And the period to bring a suit against the government or any government officer is 3 years. And time was running out. If you do not bring the suit within 3 years, it is time barred. You cannot bring the suit. So we waited till the very last moment for the government to respond, or for the Home Ministry to say, well, this is the position. But nothing was done, and we had no choice. And the family gave instructions to file the suit. So we filed the suit. This is the suit, and these are the parties who are named in the suit. It was filed and served on the Attorney General. I cannot speak in great detail with regards to the suit. Neither can I speak about the evidence that's going to be adduced. It could be considered sub judice and maybe even contemptuous. But what I can tell you is that the causes of action is very clear. If you look at paragraph 16, you will find it clearly states what the cause of action is. The plaintiff brings this suit for breaches of their constitutional and or statutory rights and or common law rights. The unlawful detention, the unlawful abduction of Pastor Koh, failure to account, I got to use my glasses, failure to account, or disclose Pastor Koh's whereabouts, misfeasance of public office, conspiracy to injure, and negligence. The case is now fixed for case management and will be set down for trial soon. The family is praying, as I'm sure you all are, that they will finally know the truth, and their father and husband will be returned to them, and those responsible will be brought to justice. There will be some closure at last. That is their hope and their prayer. Thank you for listening, and I hand it back to Dato' Kenny, our moderator. If you have any questions, I'll take it later. Thank you, Dato' Kenny.
Thank you, Dr. Jara, for bringing us through now. I'm sure there'll be questions posed to you later on. We look forward to that. And this evening, our final speaker will be Susanna herself. Susanna is a wife of Pastor Raymond Koh. And as we heard earlier on, she won the sorry, the voice. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay, the next speaker this evening is Susanna. Susanna is the wife of Raymond Koh, and she was the recipient of the 2020 U.S. Secretary of State Award for International Women of Courage for speaking out against enforced disappearances and human rights violation. Susanna is an educator, a dear close family friend, and out of this experience, she has, to our pleasant surprise, a very courageous lady to stand up to believe what is the right thing to do. Susanna, over to you then.
Thank you, Dr. Kenny.
Susanna, you got to unmute your mic.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, good evening. And really want to thank you for joining us this evening from all over the world. And I'm very happy to be able to share my journey with you. We are, in a way, remembering the 4th anniversary of Pastor Raymond, and it's been 4 years, and because his name is begins with R, we wanted everything to be R. It's we would like to ask you to reflect on what is the impact of Pastor Raymond's adoption on society. And we realize that when an adoption happens, the family is of course affected, but there are ripple effects on the society as well. The colleagues, the friends, the community that he helps. Someone that is suddenly taken away, and this loss and grief is really something that is very difficult to for people to handle, and some were depressed and others were angry. And he was a good man, and he contributed a lot to society. And it is just a loss to see that his potential is suddenly taken away, cut short because of this. Number two is to remember. Many people told me that they will never forget what happened. And we encourage you to pray for the victims and their families as they go through this difficult time. And thirdly, to respond by supporting the families, to reach out, to encourage them, especially to speak out for them. I want to say that Nohayati in Perlis is very isolated, and she needs all the support as much as you can. And four, our cry and our plea is to release Pastor Raymond. Enough is enough. 4 years is too long for us to wait, and even for the country to wait. What has happened in the last 4 years? When the adoption happened, the churches united in prayer. The churches of different denominations, Roman Catholic, Anglicans, Methodists, they all stood in solidarity with the family. And also the churches organized candlelight vigils and also individuals, both in East and West Malaysia. However, to our shock, we found out that there were 3 others that were adopted, similarly adopted around the same time, and that was Amri, Joshua Helmi, and Ruth Situpu. And together we made a request for Suhakam to carry out a public inquiry. And here, finally, after more than a year of the inquiry, Suhakam made its final decision that the police were behind it. And it was devastating for the family. We experienced broken hearts. Our dreams were shattered. Our children's future were affected. And my daughter was just entered the first year of university in US. But we thank God that through the generosity and help of many Christians,
and churches. She was able to complete her studies in the US. And we were very happy that Dato' Lee Hua Beng and Stephen Ng wrote the book, Where is Pastor Raymond Koh, which has sold about 10,000 copies to date. And it was very well documented and well written. And Suhakam recommended setting up of the Special Task Force. And we're still awaiting for the report. We met with former Home Minister and current Prime Minister, Tan Sri Muhyiddin, and he promised to get to the bottom of this. But until now, we have not seen any results or heard anything. We also met with former Prime Minister Tun Mahathir, and he said that he would talk to IGP Hamid Bador, but until now, we still do not have any news. After waiting for 3 long years, we had no choice but to file a civil suit in the Kuala Lumpur High Court. We also reach out to international agencies like UN, Open Doors, Voice of the Martyrs, Release International, and USCIRF, and the US Ambassador for Religious Freedom, Sam Brownback, to advocate for our case. And the US State Secretary, and they recognize the work that I've done speaking out against enforced disappearance, and was privileged to meet with Melania Trump and Mike Pompeo, the US Secretary. And of course, Gail mentioned, she mentioned just now about the adoption of Pastor Raymond as a prisoner of conscience. Well, what inspired me to persevere in difficult and challenging circumstances? It was a long and difficult journey, but it was Jesus. It was God that helped me through. It was by His grace and strength that I stand before you today. And another person that inspired me was he's a bright star to me. He's called Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And I was reading about the civil rights movement, and actually I visited the American the museum in Washington, the African American Museum, and it talked about the civil rights movement and how it took them a century from very, very little rights to today, where they have attained much more rights. And it took them a long time. And sometimes, yeah, people tell me that, you know, like, is it any use that we keep, you know, talking about this, we keep speaking up, we keep, you know, pressuring the police, the And I think looking at other movements, civil rights movements, like in the Philippines and other places, sometimes, you know, it takes a long time, but, you know, justice will come. And I don't think, you know, God will waste what these 4 people have sacrificed, their suffering, and maybe even their lives for religious freedom, for expressing the freedom to express themselves. And Martin Luther King, said this: I have a dream that my 4 children will one day live in a nation, and they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. And he encourages us not to lose hope, but to have courage, to go on. And he said at that time, before he was assassinated, that today I still have that dream. And it is very important why we need to fight for justice, because without justice, there can be no peace. And he who passively accepts evil is as much involved in it as he who helps to perpetrate it. If we sit passively and don't do anything, we are complicit, as if we are involved. And for Malaysia to be at peace, to have peace, there needs to be justice. And this is my desire, my prayer, my dream, just like Martin Luther King Jr., he also had a dream that God will use me as an instrument of peace, that he will make our lives, our one and only life, matter, as all lives matter. We need to respect lives, whether they are Indian, Chinese, Malay, Aborigine, or Orang Asli or Orang Asal. All lives matter. And that God will keep our beloved country safe, progressive, and harmonious. I want to thank the team of competent, experienced, courageous lawyers who represented us on a pro bono basis and still representing us. And they are really brave, and they are one of the top lawyers in this country. And yet they sacrifice their time to help people like us. And thank you so much. And also the family would like to thank Suhakam, Datuk Marvin Kwai, Datuk Dr. Aisha, and Nick Salida for the courageous decision that they made regarding the enforced disappearance. And for Caged, I think they are the little bright sparks that we have in our country. Thomas Fan, Rama, Swaram, and also I want to thank Archbishop Julian Liao, who has been very supportive, chairman of the Christian Federation of Malaysia, and all the churches that have been very supportive. And due to space and time, I'm not able to include everyone that I want to include, but I'm very, very grateful from the bottom of my heart. I want to express my appreciation and gratitude for many who have helped us in one way or another to advance this case and the cause of Pastor Raymond. Yeah, thank you. And I'll pass it back to Dr. Kenny.
Thank you, Susanna, for that very touching sharing. Many of us are truly honored but humbled by the fact that we are so closely associated with you and the family to walk through this journey together. We really appreciate what you're doing. Now for the final session tonight, for the next 10 to 12 minutes, we have a time of Q&A. Are there any questions from the floor? Maybe I'll get the ball rolling. I asked a few questions. Maybe Dato' Gudial, I have a first question for you. You have been a senior counsel, long time in the forefront of fighting human rights, constitutional cases, ISA, deprived of the liberty, freedom of expression, and many, many other kind of cases. But this is the first time in Malaysia that lives disappeared in thin air and the state has been implicated. All along, we thought that such nonsense only happened in banana republics like Argentina once upon a time, Chile, in Sri Lanka, in Idi Amin's Uganda. But we never thought it would happen here. Would you, as a human rights lawyer, think that this is a new low that we have headed to? Your comments, please.
Thanks, Dr. Kenny. I don't know about whether this is a new law, but I think if, for example, the video had not emerged or Roshan had not come up with that evidence, then this would have passed on as one of those cases that would be explained by the authorities as this is something gone wrong, he has got some family problems or financial problems and so on, which was actually the story that was being maintained at one particular stage. Even with regard to Amri Cheman, the story was, he had some financial problems and that was the reason and so on. So I think that below the radar, there are these kind of situations that are beginning to emerge, because if you look at the totality of the evidence, the cumulative evidence, it is a concerted effort by a band of people who are officially sanctioned, maybe secret, but officially sanctioned, and who have got a commitment to rid the country of religious tendencies which they do not approve of. So I think, as I highlighted a little bit earlier, these are very dangerous trends that are being exposed, that are coming to the surface. So I don't think it's a law, but we can treat it as a situation which needs to be attended to immediately, because if this is not arrested, then I think many more cases like this will continue. And it so happened that because of the expose, we were able to, tap into a lot of situations, and Suhakam took it up and so on and so forth. But I feel that there is some underlying substratum of activity that is going on. And we hope that with this suit that Dr. Gerald talked about, we will be able to bring this to the surface and maybe try to nip it in the bud. Thanks, Kenny.
Thank you, Dr. Gudia. Any of the speakers, you have any comment on that? No, if not, I have a question for Mariam. Mariam, the question is this now. Unfortunately, in Malaysia, whatever sensitive issues that we have, any big political issues that we have, and in this case, it's purely a human rights issue. But very soon, it's spin into an issue of race and religion. What are your comments on that?
Without race, without religion, I won't mention the other R's because we get into big trouble. Yeah, these leaders will lose their power because they need this. They need this hold on religion over the Malays and over the non-Malays. It's just control of people, manipulation of people, just to hang on to power.
Any other comments, other speaker? To me, it's purely a universal issue, an issue of human rights.
But it's using those two to undermine our human rights, isn't it? Isn't there, aren't we supposed to have Article 11, freedom of religion? But Malays don't have it, do they? The Quran says there is no compulsion in religion. Doesn't apply in Malaysia. Isn't that our human rights as well?
Yeah, after Lina Joy's case, yeah.
And Lina Joy's case is made public. We don't know about the other cases that are hidden from public view. I think some people probably will keep themselves quiet out of the hidden away so that they don't get into big trouble.
Thank you, Mariam. Rama, I have a question for you next. In your blog, you set on record very clear, very thorough of some of these abuses. And basically, you're acting as a postman, as a very faithful scribe to record events. But as a postman, unfortunately, I've been caught up for teh tarik in Bukit Aman. I understand at the moment we are under emergency. How do you feel about this then?
Well, as it happens, I like teh tarik, so from that perspective, it's not such a bad thing. But they don't actually give me the teh tarik when I go there. So yes, I mean, I think that what I'm seeing is impunity. I mean, so we talk about the R, right? I mean, there's a lot of R's, but impunity is the one thing that I said to someone recently in business. We always say the only constant is change. So we always tell people, be prepared for change, blah, blah, blah. But then it seems that in Malaysia, the only constant, at least when it comes to the police, is impunity. So I see so many cases of neglect, of sheer abuse of power, of neglect and so on, especially death in custody cases that I've been writing about. So I think that what is really needed is a real groundswell of people who say, enough, this has to stop. And I think that's really only going to happen if we have the kind of alternative version of what's been happening in Myanmar. So in Myanmar, we have all these people beating their pots and pans, and they're doing all that, and they're drawing attention to the injustices that are going on in that country. And in the same way, I think that we all have to clamor and we all have to be prepared to be called up and recognize that it's really not going to make any difference if we believe that this is what human rights is all about, because we won't be alone. And that has been my experience. My experience has been that people have always come up and tried to assist, and lawyers such as yourselves. I mean, there are 3 of you on this call, and there's so many others who are willing to assist. So I don't think it's as bad as people think it is. I think it's also good publicity to be called up for questioning, because it gets the cause a lot of visibility. I'll just stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Rama. There are some questions coming in. I think 2 relevant questions here. I'll address them to my friend Gerald. Gerald, the question says that the case management will be soon. The question asked is, how soon is soon? Will you expect it to be prolonged? And a related question here is this. It says, given the state of the judiciary at the moment, are you optimistic?
All right, let me do the case management. This documents in Suhakam went to thousands and thousands of pages, all of which we have asked to include as evidence in the trial. But the process is you got to exchange the evidence, which includes documents, reports, videos with the other side, and they exchange what they have, and that takes time. We also then got to do witness statements and decide who we're going to call. That too takes time. Added to that, we have the MCO, which makes it very difficult to secure all this and present it. And then we have 3 councils on board where we have to meet and agree on things to be done. So in terms of how long it will take, I think probably next year the case will start. I don't see it starting this year because of all that that we have to go through. With regards to optimism and the state of the judiciary, the recent decision, as Professor Guldia was saying, on that Kiara case gives us confidence. And the recent decision of that lady who was a Buddhist, and Tunku Maimun made that decision saying that she has the right to profess her faith because she was, born a Buddhist. So there is hope. I'm saying do not give up hope. I asked this question and I leave you with this thought to Raja Aziz Edros, one of our pillars, and as Professor Goodell say, one of the northern lights that guides us in difficult times. I asked him when he did the Anwar cases in 1999, I said, is there any hope? And why do you keep doing it with everything, And he told me this, Gerald, our duty as lawyers, and I think it's to everybody, is to keep banging on the doors of justice. You just be prepared and you do your best and you keep banging and don't stop banging, because one day the doors will open and you'll be ready to present your case. So I've taken that advice to heart, and I'll keep banging and banging on the doors of justice, hoping that one day it will open up and I'll be ready. And I think all the counsels who are doing Raymond Koh's case will be ready, and we hope for the best.
Thank you, Jara.
Yeah.
There's one question. There are 2 questions. They are related. Is there any thief in the Suhakam report? And related to that, my dear friend there, Dato' Lee Hua Beng, posed that question. Is that Suhakam report is filed in Parliament? Why are all our MPs so quiet on this issue? Who would like to answer? Jara again? Or whomever?
I can say about the Suhakam report. Suhakam is an investigative body, and it's empowered by the Act, and its jurisdiction is to investigate, make findings, and recommend to the government. That's all. They cannot prosecute, neither can they arrest anybody or jail anybody, because they're governed by statute. It's a government institution. So their job they have done, and I must commend the commissioners who have so bravely and quite accurately and precisely stated the position. So they have done their best. And of course it has teeth in the sense that it has made the finding. And that finding should speak for itself. And if the government wants to take it into account, they will. And that would depend on how we react and how the public feels about it. I think I would say just about that. Maybe Professor Gurdial can throw some more light in that area.
Yes, Prof.
I think, this as part of awareness building and making it a normative effect. I think Suhakam and other reports by NGOs and activities by NGOs take on a very important role. And therefore, it acts as a pressure. It gives legitimacy to the kind of causes that we are talking about. Because without these kind of reports, this would have been just, swept under the carpet as, like I said earlier, as another, unfortunate incident by a person who has, gone wrong or who has gone awry with regard to his own life. So this is very important that Suhakam, for example, has exposed this. So it's very difficult for the authorities who have been called to give evidence to deny their evidence later on when it comes to the actual civil suit. Because as you know, we can always, if there's any written statement that has been, if there's been any statement made which contradicts what a person states on oath, for example, in the civil suit you're filing, then we can impeach his credibility to show that, he's not a truthful witness. So I think inquiries on by bodies like Suhakam are extremely important. And they also then create legitimacy as to the cause that we are fighting. That's very important. As regards parliamentarians, why they have not reacted, I think, we have to do extra lobbying to get people to move. After all, there was the Pakatan Harapan government to whom these presentations were made. The officers were all part of change, wanted to bring about change, greater democracy, greater accountability. And to a large extent, I think they failed us. So that's a very sad, indictment of a government that was committed to change, abandoning, in a sense, I think, betraying, a very clear situation of abuse of human rights, which their own institution, Suhakam is an institution set up under an act of parliament by the government itself. And to thumb their nose literally at the report itself, I think is an utter shame and a blot on our system of democracy. But we'll have to hold them to account, and I hope one day we will do that. Thanks.
Thank you, Professor.
May I just
yes,
something?
please.
I think that one of the good things that happened under the Pakatan government was the establishment of the standing committees. So we had all these committees that were set up, and there was even one on the Home Ministry. So I think that one of the important things that we have to campaign for as civil society is to have parliamentarians that really do work outside of the sittings of Parliament, the formal sittings of the large chamber. So I think that this is something that we need to make, as civil society NGOs, and also, any one of us listening in on this call, we need to be talking to our MPs. We need to be building connections with them, and we need to be saying one of the things that we want to see is a shadow cabinet. We want a real shadow cabinet, and we also want these committees that will really call up these ministers and say, hey, what's happening? Suhakam has found all these things. What are you doing about it? And are you looking at reports such as Suhakam reports or coroner's reports and all these other things when you make decisions on whom to promote? These are some of the things that I think these avenues are required, and we need to have this type of real democracy in our country. And that's how I think these reports can be used. Civil society can do a much better job, I think, of using the information that is made available to us by statutory bodies such as Suhakam. Thank you.
Thank you, Rama, for that input. Since time is running, Susanna, a quick question for you. I remember with Dr. Gerald and the rest of us, we accompanied you. We met with Tan Sri Muhyiddin, at that time the Home Minister under the previous government, and now he's a Prime Minister. If you were to meet him again face to face, what would you tell him?
Yeah, if I have the opportunity to meet the current Prime Minister, I would remind him of what he has promised us as a family, as together with Nohayati and her children, and also our lawyers were there. And I will remind him that he needs to resolve this cases of enforced disappearance, because it is a black mark on the country, on our human rights record, and it will also affect the perception of investors. If they are going to invest in a country, it needs to be a place that is safe, that people, are not like kidnapped in broad daylight. So, I think it's crucial for the government, current government, to really do something about it, because it's already too long. And the longer they wait, the effect to the country, will be more.
Thank you, Susanna. We'll be wrapping up shortly now. I'll just very quickly, maybe in 2 sentences, each speaker would like to round up what you want to say for the audience here to bring home. Perhaps I start with Mariam, please. What you want the audience to bring home tonight in 2 sentences?
Educate your children and get hold of your MP, get him to do some work. Because like Charity, this education about intolerance and extremism begins at home. And when I try to get people to come to this talk, this webinar, the reaction from a lot of the public was, who is he? What's he got to do with us? So we are not reaching out down there, not fully. And it affects them, really, it does. But they don't seem to be aware. So our education is just rubbish. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam. That's very profound. Educate your children. Start from young. Rama, what would be your 2-liner for us to take home this evening, please?
I would say that all of us have to become storytellers and story sharers. And I think that we have to really believe that without justice, we cannot be an effective society. And so love for our neighbor means justice. And so we have to advocate for justice in Parliament and everywhere else.
Thank you, Rama. Dr. Jara?
It is enough for good men to do nothing, for evil to triumph. So we all have roles to play, and we must play our role to the best we can. Lawyers have to do their part. Journalists have to do their part. Voters must vote wisely and do their part. You have avenues like Facebook, YouTube. You got to share the things that matter. It's not just about clothing and fancy living. You know, it's matters like this where life is concerned, and shape public opinion, because then public opinion will eventually dictate who runs this country.
Thank you, Jara. That's a good one. Every one of us got a role, do our part. Professor Goodia?
Yeah, I'll just say very briefly, I think there's a very serious malignancy that is affecting our society and preventing the right decisions from being taken. And this is this whole infection of our whole body politic by race and religion. That is why, you know, even those people who we brought in for change had to respond to this kind of race religion signals and were paralyzed into inactivity. So I think that it's very, very important for us to recognize that we have to somehow manage to fight against this, overcome this contamination of the society itself, so that we can return it to its pristine level and begin to live as a civilized society functioning under proper democratic and ethical norms. That's all.
Thank you, Professor. Susanna, a final word for us, please.
Yeah, please continue to support our campaign to speak out, to respond, to remember, to pray. I hope to see this build momentum and to be just more than Raymond, but other people that have been disappeared, and also to be about human lives. All lives matter, and we need to respect human lives.
Thank you, Susanna. Indeed, all lives matter, irrespective of color, creed, class, or caste. And let's be a party to that campaign. Please visit Susanna's Facebook and help to campaign for this just cause. And on this note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for spending time with us this evening. It has been quite a fruitful evening. Thank you for the 6 speakers here. Truly, we are honored and privileged to have all of you. We look forward to the next event. Thank you very much. Good night. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you and good night.
Thank you.
The excessive publicity given to the abduction case of Pastor Raymond Koh may have jeopardized the police's investigation. Inspector General of Police Tan Sri Khalid Abu Bakar says until today the police have yet to obtain any fresh leads.
Jadi sekali lagi saya mohon supaya media, orang-orang sorangan NGO ni dalam hal-hal kidnap, kes-kes penculikan Shut your bloody mouth.
It has been a year since Pastor Raymond Koh was abducted. Until now, he is still nowhere to be found. In a recent interview with Kini TV, his family told us about the past 365 days without a father or a husband, and how it completely turned their lives upside down.
Despite 100 days into Pastor Raymond Koh's disappearance, his family has not given up in their pursuit in seeking for his release.
You will love him. He's funny. He cracks a lot of jokes sometimes. Maybe when he comes out, we all talk to him. We will get to know what happened, and we get to hear his story. And that's what we hope for. Not for this to go away in silence.
The sisters said they had dreamt that their father was alive and are hopeful of seeing him again.
We were on a holiday, and it was by the beach, and I saw my dad. There, and I called out to him, and I asked him, "Where have you been?" And then he said, he's been away alone.
You know, my personal experience with the police force is they are one of the best in the world. If you look at Kim Jong Nam's case, they managed to catch the people just like that. If you look at Kevin Moraya's case, they used CCTVs and track and managed to catch the individuals who were involved in that. So if you track the police track record, it's very good. And those cases were done, in secret. They were intending to do that, the way in which it was done. This case is done in broad daylight, done by so many individuals, done on a road where there are cameras that are catching the people, and they're traveling on highways, CCTVs. So for them not to be able to identify who were involved, not to be able to know which groups, I find it hard to swallow. Because they've got informers everywhere, and the Special Branch is one of the best in the world. It has been said many times.
For an entire year, Susanna Liu has been the main spokesperson for the family, constantly at the forefront to pressure the police for updates and reports on her husband. The Koh family and some civil society groups are of the opinion that it may be an enforced disappearance. As a result, the Human Rights Commission Suhakam held a hearing that lasted for 12 days across October 2017 to January 2018 for their own inquiry into the matter. According to the International Convention on the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearance, the term is described as the arrest, detention, abduction, or any other form of deprivation of liberty by agents of the state, or by groups of persons acting with the authorization, support, or acquiescence of the state.
They did not give us updates, which is a normal thing to do for any kidnapping or abduction cases. They would make announcements in the press.
Saya dah beritahu, banyak kali saya beritahu supaya biar kita siasat kes ini dulu, jangan bagi publicity. Tetapi oleh kerana kalau banyak sangat publicity, ia mencacatkan siasatan kita. Tapi apapun, siasatan ini kita teruskan. Tidak, there is no such thing as kita menutup kes ini atau kita tidak membuat apa-apa.
Questions were directed to him pro-satelliting, that means preaching. The questions were only addressed to that.
They questioned me for 5 hours until 3 a.m. into the night. And at that time, I was already very traumatized. I was called again the next day for more questioning, and it was about the same questions again about Christianization, reading room.
Ada juga laporan polis yang mengatakan pastor ini memurtadkan orang Muslim. Jadi kedua-dua laporan ini kita perlu siasat.
The ITP says this on the 20th of March 2017 reported on Star Online. Then IGP was Khalid, and he said this, Tan Sri Khalid said, on the case involving a 31-year-old part-time Uber driver who was charged with demanding $30,000 from Koh's son, Jonathan, at Paradigm Mall at 9:46 p.m. on March 6, Khalid said the man was not involved in the pastor's abduction. Suddenly, Lam becomes the main suspect.
We deal with the disappearances of a very short introduction of Joshua Hilmi, Ruth Hilmi, Amri Chipmat, and Pastor Raymond Koh. The police also say the disappearance of Pastor Raymond Koh is connected with the case of Lam Chang Nam, who has been charged in court. And this is interesting, the disappearance of Pastor Raymond Koh is somehow connected with the search and seizure of the exhibits found in the house of Muhammad Fauzi bin Tajuddin Fauzi in Bangkalan Hulu, Perak, who was shot dead by the police in a shootout in Baling, Kedah on the 17th of June 2017. Fauzi was suspected to be a drug and firearms trafficker. The police contended that the exhibits seized from the house included pictures of Pastor Raymond Koh, his car and his house at Prima 16 Petaling Jaya. The police believe that Fauzi and his drug trafficking group was the same group involved in the abduction of Pastor Raymond Koh. Decision of the panel. Upon a detailed evaluation of the evidence adduced, having read and considered the written submissions of counsel on behalf of the family, assisting officers of Suhakam, counsel of the Bar Council, and officers appearing for the police, and upon hearing the oral submissions of the parties on the 6th of March, the panel has arrived at a unanimous final decision. After having held lengthy discussions and deliberations in this case, the panel is of the unanimous view that Pastor Raymond Koh is a victim of enforced disappearance.
So I want the public to read the book and to draw their own conclusion. And also finally, you have to pressure the government to do something. You cannot let somebody just disappear.
Why do you think it is important to have this commission?
Well, it is not a commission, it is a task force. But importantly is because, as I've said, the report that Suhakam has produced and been made public just a few months ago has created a lot of perception issues and whatnot, because in a way it's said in the report that all this so-called forced disappearance is because of involvement of the special branch within the police force. So that is one thing, but of course beyond that, I think we would also like to find the real truth behind the whole thing. So that's what the cabinet has agreed to our proposition, that this task force will do the job to verify and whatever it is. So we leave it entirely to the task force to decide. But I would believe in most cases it will be dealt with internally. So I do not feel that there's necessity to make the public decide, because it's not a royal commission of inquiry which have set certain.
But they are serious allegations against the police.
Yeah, of course. But don't make any assumption. Give them the confidence they will do it to the very best of their ability, with full independence, and of course with sense of credibility as well.
If task force will answer to you or to the cabinet?
Well, I will inform the cabinet, because this is of public interest. And of course the result also will be known later, where there is a necessity to let public know. And obviously the family concerned would like to know what is the outcome of this task force job.
Well, we cannot please everybody, but some people will be happy, some people will not be happy. I cannot guarantee satisfaction for 100% of the people involved.
Yeah, okay.
So just to clarify, you were not aware of because they claim that the action was taken by the SB, and at the time you were the Home Minister. So just to clarify that you were not aware of.
No, there is no such directive given by me or given by KSU then. Then I hope the investigation has to be carried out professionally. Okay.
Saya tidak fikir kita tak bagi kerjasama. Itu dia punya dakwaan dan tomahan saja. Kita sedaya upaya kita membantu mengenal pasti saksi-saksi yang diperlukan oleh pihak Suhakam.
Ya, saya dengar tu. Tapi saya yakin dia tidak menjejaskan kewibawaan pasukan tugas. Penama yang disebutkan tadi, saya telah dapat maklumat yang lebih lanjut bahawa beliau ada terlibat dalam masa pendengaran kes hadir dan cuma participate sekali je untuk memberikan itu dalam sesi itu. Jadi lebih daripada itu tak ada. Macam mana pun bagi saya keanggotaan tu ramai. Jadi seorang saja tak boleh kalau ada tujuan nak mempengaruhi. Lagipun pengusinya adalah bekas ketua hakim atau hakim. Jadi saya penuh yakin kita bagi dia ruang.
Tasik ada perkembangan terbaru tak pasal pasukan Kasut Siasatan Amri Cik Mat, kehilangan Amri Cik Mat juga?
Mereka masih menjalankan tugas. Tempoh masa berakhir saya kurang ingat. Jadi kita bagi daripada tarikh lantikan sekarang ni sampai 6 bulan. Jadi sementara belum ada laporan balik pada kita. Jadi kita tunggulah tugas pasukan itu.
Finally, we wish to highlight that 2 years have now been passed since the abduction of Pastor Raymond Koh. We urge the Malaysian government to order a new independent investigation into this case and ensure that the perpetrators of this crime be brought to justice by ensuring the well-being and safety of all religious workers and their freedom to carry out their duties free from further threats, intimidation or violence. Thank you.
My name is Susanna Liu, and I'm one of the recipients for the International Women of Courage 2020. And I want to continue to highlight this case in the international scene, not only for Pastor Raymond, but also for the other 3 activists who have been disappeared, Amri Cik Mat, Joshua and Ruth Helmi. Religious freedom is a basic human right, and everyone should have the right to express their beliefs. Anyone can get involved in activism, and regardless of their background and abilities, and this will make the country a better place when women speak out for their rights.